Hi, guys. How's it going? Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Timothy. Hi, Jason. Good to be back.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm raring to go.
Yeah, us too. Hey, everybody in the comment section, everybody watching live.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, we're having some pretty extreme snow and ice here today. We had some whiteout conditions earlier. It was quite an adventure taking my son to school this morning. But we made it back. And yeah, we're ready to go. Yeah, we made it back in one piece. All right. Do you want to say?
Cool.
All right. All right. So let's just do this. What are we, number 27 now? Oh, and this is the first week in Strange of the year. So good one. Good times. All right, guys. Brain chip allows paralyzed man to post first thought ever direct through a tweet. A paralyzed man has made the first direct thought tweet after having a computer chip implanted in his brain. Philip O'Keefe, a 62-year-old Australian who suffers from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, composed and posted the tweet using only his thought via a brain-computer interface developed by neurotech startup Synchron. No need for keystrokes or voices. I created this tweet just by thinking it. After sharing the initial tweet, Mr. O'Keefe posted seven further tweets replying to questions from Twitter users. My hope is that I'm paving the way for people to tweet through their thoughts, the final one stated. The stent road device was first implanted in April 2020 after Mr. O'Keefe's condition deteriorated to a point that he was unable to engage in work-related or other independent activities. It was inserted through the jugular vein in order to avoid invasive brain surgery and has since allowed him to reconnect with loved ones and colleagues via email, as well as play simple computer-based games like solitaire. When I first heard about this technology, I knew how much independence it could give back to me. Mr. O'Keefe said after posting the tweet, according to a press release. The system is astonishing. It's like learning to ride a bike. It takes practice, but once you're rolling, it becomes natural. Now I just think about where on the computer I want to click, and I can email, bank, shop, and now message the world via Twitter. It reportedly took 4 hours after the device was implanted in order to be able to use it to input text on a computer. With the Twitter takeover on December 23rd of 2021, used as an opportunity to promote the technology. These fun holiday tweets are actually an important moment for the field of implantable brain-computer interfaces. They highlight the connection, hope, and freedom that BCIs give to people like Phil, who have had so much of their functional independence taken away due to debilitating paralysis. The first in-human study of Synchron's brain-computer interface is set to take place in the US next year. Synchron is one of several neurotech startups making major advancements in BCI technologies, with Elon Musk's Neuralink also planning to begin human trials in 2022. The billionaire entrepreneur has previously claimed that future Neuralink devices will be able to do everything from restoring full body functionality to quadriplegics to streaming music directly into the brain. Some of these trials have already taken place on pigs and monkeys, with over 1,000 electrode transmission devices allowing a 9-year-old macaw monkey to play video games using only his mind. Mr. Musk says the ultimate aim of the technology is to allow humans to compete with advanced artificial intelligence. We will see how far this takes us, and we will see how far we can go. Some Minority Report shit there.
Something weird about it going
Can I
to the
start?
jugular vein.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. I'm very skeptical about this story. I don't think I believe it. Lots of reasons. Okay, my heart goes out to that man with ALS. It's an absolutely repugnant, evil disease, and it's very sad for him and his family. But I don't know. I mean, they just said that this sounds to me like they're hustling for startup money or investment. This we have to be very careful with this kind of thing. We don't know if he really did that or if someone in the lab did it on his behalf in order to hustle up funds to show that they got somewhere. I don't understand how you can insert a chip up through the jugular vein and into the brain when the complexity of connecting to the neural pathways is absolutely unbelievably difficult. I can't understand how you could send it up here, even if you had a mini camera, and even if you had like CAT scans, how you would actually fuse it to the synapses and the nerves. I just don't understand how that could be done that way. The only way that can be done is to open the head up, find them and put them in. And even then, they're very simple impulses. They're this playing tic-tac-toe and composing letters. I find, I hate to sound skeptical at the level, right? The man is lying or anything, but it sounds to me, this sounds very fishy, especially when Elon Musk jumps on it. And all I'm seeing here is investment capital, investment capital, investment capital. You have to be very careful with these high-tech startups. Back in the dot-com day, the genome, well, by dot-com day to a certain extent, the genome day, basically companies were claiming that you could find psychopaths in genes, serial killers in genes. You could find anything in a person's genetics. And what they discovered was, and Rupert Sheldrake in his book, The Science Delusion, covers this very well, is that we are not in our genes. This is why you can have a whole lineage of families are perfectly normal, and then suddenly a psychopathic child shows up. You're not in your genes. And this is what the genome project was an enormous flop, because they discovered you're not on your genes. We're also not in our brains. Our brains are merely just a receiver detector device to let us navigate this flesh and blood world, this material world. Consciousness is not in the brain. There isn't a neurosurgeon on earth that could show you it's in the brain. And now I know they have, because I've looked, they're always very interested in neuroscience, that they have done things like hooked up things to people's brains where they could see there was a famous test where they showed the baseball player knew the ball was coming before the ball was thrown by the pitcher. Now, that's how they determined this was not because the brain said, "Oh, look, here's the ball, it's coming." It made a split impulse and stopped a microsecond before the ball was thrown. It was a pulse. It wasn't a series of complex instructions. In order to make a single letter on a screen using your brain, the amount of the complexities of the brain is enormous. You're not going to do that by sticking a thing up someone's jugular, up their jugular, into their brain. You've got to get in there and wire every synapse into those chips. And I've been seeing this for years, like photographs of brains with like almost like soldered connections to the parts of the chip and stuff like that. A lot of this is just fudging. I'm very, very skeptical about this, especially when that, the Eggman's, name is brought into it. These people they're always making out that they're more advanced than they are, and a lot of it is hustling for cash.
Yeah, and I think with that too, they talked about the was it an orangutan or some sort of primate being able to play a video game with it, and it's like, I don't know, has anybody seen a primate actually play a video game with like a controller or a keyboard or something? Like even just that concept of like, wait a minute, have we done tests that they can actually play a video game with their hands or with their body, let alone being able to put it into the mind, the brain of a primate and have it know that what it's doing is playing a video game. I don't think that they could train, be able to communicate with the primate to tell it, okay, now think of you're playing that game on the screen. There's something fishy about that aspect of it too.
It's like those in the early days of science, space exploration. They put monkeys and dogs up into space, and they made it sound like the dogs and the monkeys were flying a spaceship.
Right.
It's the same crap. It's the same. We're still here, Right. I'm very skeptical about this for lots of reasons. The same reason the Neuralink thing. A lot of people are quite paranoid about it. But I wouldn't be too paranoid about it. I think they're so far away from it. They don't even understand how things like dreaming fully works or anything. I mean, how does, this, okay, it's one thing to have like cognitive functions being hardwired into a chip. Okay, I can see that. The brain works on electricity, it works on pulses and stuff like that. But they're just simply pulses of electrical activity in certain partitions of the brain. They're not complex information things that happen at the same time. The processing of the complex information happens on the beyond. This thing just allows us to. So I'm very skeptical about this. I'd love it to be true that this man could have some kind of quality of life and stuff like that, with this horrible disease. But I don't know. I don't. To me, I just smell someone's fishing for cash.
Yeah. And also probably like playing up the propaganda for the metaverse coming forward to like get people thinking, oh, technology and the merger with humans is right here around the corner. So I imagine like, there's going to be a lot. I think there will be a lot more articles like this coming out about the idea that like the merger of humans and technology are right around the corner. But really, it's just getting people ready to get their minds so sucked into this new virtual reality. And so that like they'll be waiting, people will be waiting for, oh, I just can't wait to get the chip put inside me and stuff. People will just be lining up to have this kind of thing.
It'd be all worked out. I mean, I'll give you an example, a simple one. Tinnitus or tinnitus, how you want to pronounce it. This is a very common condition many people have, a ringing in the ears. I have it. When I have a cold that comes up, normally I don't have it too loud. There isn't a doctor on this earth that can tell you where it comes from. I've heard stories of people having their eardrums actually amputated to try and stop the ringing in their ears, and they still heard the ringing. It's because I tell you, it's not in the ears. It's somewhere here at the base of the spine, and it's this area here. And no one knows the cause of it. It's not ringing. You're only perceiving it in your ears because you associate hearing with your hearing cortex. But in reality, it's a buzzing in the brain. Now, if they can't even figure out what tinnitus or tinnitus is, a loud signal that's amplified in the brain, then how can they be making complex chips that can play tic-tac-toe?
Right. I've heard, I don't know if it's from you, Thomas. Was it you that was saying that tinnitus actually might be the nervous system resonance? Was that you a few years ago? Or someone, I don't know, somebody said that the tinnitus might be something from your nervous system, like your amplification of it, that, you're hearing the buzzing of the electrical current or an effect from the electrical current within your body.
It was very years ago on Vaughn, and this is probably where you heard it. I read an article by Brian Eno where they put him in a room that was so heavily sound insulated that he actually heard his own nervous system. And what he described his nervous system sounding like was very close to what tinnitus is described as. So it's almost like a hyper detection of the nervous. It's probably the nervous system we're hearing. But even the process of how you even hear, it's like the way you hear with your teeth, run a comb across your teeth. That's weird, like if you run a comb across your teeth, you're a kid, and you can hear music and everything. And so, I mean, I'm very skeptical about the story. I wish the man and his family the best of luck, and I hope it is true. But I just think it's just hustling for cash.
Propaganda, yeah.
And the propaganda.
Yep. I agree with all that too. Going up through the jugular too. Just, oh God. No, I think I'd rather stick with the disease. I'm good. I'm good. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. As spiritualism's popularity grows, photographer Shannon Taggart takes viewers inside the world of seances, mediums, and orbs. The word seance conjures images of darkened rooms, entranced mediums, strange occurrences, and spirit voices. For many contemporary audiences, these visions might seem like something out of the past, or perhaps a movie rather than a living belief system. For the past 20 years, American photographer Shannon Taggart has explored modern spiritualism, a religion whose adherents believe in communication with the dead. Her photographic series, Seance, which was recently on view at the Albin Kuhn Gallery at the University of Maryland, provides a window into this often misunderstood religion. As a curator and art historian who has researched apparition photographs and the art of conspiracy theory, I was drawn to Taggart's images because they offer a lens through which to examine the role of spirituality in modern life. In an era defined by a global pandemic, heightened political division, and the planetary threat of climate change, I wonder, is spiritualism due for a major resurgence? Spiritualism emerged near Rochester, New York in 1848 when two sisters, Kate and Margaret Fox, claimed to hear a mysterious rapping at their bedroom wall. The adolescents claimed to communicate through a system of knocks with the spirit of a man who had died in the house years before. News of the phenomenon traveled quickly, and the girls appeared before crowds demonstrating their purported abilities. Soon, reports of similar phenomena occurring across the United States appeared in the press, and the possibility of speaking with the deceased fueled the popular imagination. Spiritualism first grew in private. People who channeled communication with the dead, called mediums, operated out of their homes, where they would organize seance circles, gatherings in which a small group attempted to make contact with the spirit world. Over time, spiritualists started appearing publicly at conventions and outdoor summer camp meetings. By the 1870s, they began to put down roots, founding like-minded communities and centers of study, such as the spiritualist colony of Lilydale, New York. Talked about that one. In addition to holding seances, spiritualists practice healings and believe in the gift of prophecy. Mediums say they convey messages from the dead to the living, including reports about the future. Many spiritualists hope to make utopian visions of the future a reality in the present by supporting progressive political causes such as abolitionism, women's rights, and indigenous rights. Notably, spiritualism gave women an unprecedented role in religion, providing an audience and a platform to deliver messages, both personal and political. Suffragists Marion H. Skidmore, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony all spoke at Lilydale. The views of spiritualists thus represented a radical break from traditional religion and political authority. The Fox sisters' purported ability to communicate with the dead became known as the spiritual telegraph, referencing the recent invention by Samuel B. Morse. As spiritualism developed, adherents embraced technology as tools for spirit communication and to prove the existence of spirits. Photography became the perfect medium with which to create an iconography of spiritualism. Whether it was through astronomical, microscopic, or X-ray photography, cameras could render the unseen visible. Despite the proliferation of altered photographs in the 19th century, the photograph's status as a truthful representation of reality remained, and one might argue continued to remain largely intact. Photography also played a leading role in the 19th century memorial culture, since the camera could freeze time and render absent loved ones present, if only as a visual trace. The American Civil War brought death at an unprecedented scale into people's living rooms through the pages of the illustrated press. Black attire, mourning jewelry, and the genre of post-mortem photography were commonplace in a culture of grieving. In the 1860s, New York portrait photographer William Mumler and his wife, Hannah, a medium, offered portrait sessions in which spirits of the sitters' loved ones appeared to manifest in the resulting photographs. Mumler's spectacular photographs also raised the specter of hucksterism. The photographer was charged with fraud by claims who argued they were fake photographs, and none other than showman P.T. Barnum gave evidence for the prosecution. In the early 20th century, Sherlock Holmes creator Sir Arthur Conan Doyle famously rallied to defend British medium Ada Emma Dean, who was also accused of fake spirit photographs. The double-sided coin of belief and skepticism haunts these historical examples. Nonetheless, the psychological impact of these images among the grieving remained powerful. So I know we've talked about this before. I think it was even in the last show with that Lilydale place. So I think we're kind of all on the same page already as far as what we think most likely is going on with mediums. But I had a really cool idea when I was reading it before, how they were talking about, this revival of spiritualism or spiritism. I think without the part of of bringing in mediums and talking to the spirit world and stuff, that's kind of what's going on now. And it's starting, in little groups here and there, but it's spreading sort of like wildfire. So I kind of wanted to take this story and flip it over. And instead of talking about it from the medium side and talking to the dead spirits and everything, which we've already covered too, that, it does help people grieve and that's a good thing. But if we talked about it in a way that brought that mindset of that revival back into, especially now where it's like the mainstream topic, even within kind of underground cultures, it's still kind of, we're all just talking about the same thing. And I get it, it's a big deal, but we need to really revive that, parallel society and how are we going to do this? What are we actually doing about it in our everyday lives all the time? And so that, I don't know, it kind of segued off of it, but that's what it got me thinking about.
Well, you read my mind there because I was thinking the same thing as you were reading that story. It's interesting that it's making a comeback, because usually it comes back in times of crisis. It really kicked off in America after the Civil War, because so many people lost their sons and husbands and fathers and stuff. And then it kicked off big time after World War One. I think Arthur Conan Doyle even lost a son in World War One, and that was what triggered him. And then right before World War II, it was huge in Germany. In fact, Hitler's niece, the one that committed suicide, where when Hitler was interviewed by the police in Munich over what happened, she said she went to some spiritualist meeting, came back highly distraught, and threw herself out the window. So that's interesting too, isn't it? She may have heard something about what was coming or something like that. The whole history of spiritualism is very interesting. The way, the debunking thing is interesting too. Harry Houdini put a huge amount of effort into debunking spiritualists, but he didn't say it wasn't real. He said he was exposing the fakes because he was desperate to contact his mother. He was very close to his mother, and he just one fake after the next. But apparently there was an event, and it's very interesting. I talk about it in Liber Providence, and it's out there. You can read more deeply into it. That one day Houdini's mother or something, not the mother, Houdini got absolute proof of someone who had died talking to them and told them specific information that couldn't happen. And it was almost like one of those things like don't get what you wish for. And Houdini got it, and both him and Arthur Conan Doyle were astounded. They were just like, well, that just proves it. And Houdini believed it. And then suddenly Houdini had a complete change of heart. When Arthur Conan Doyle went back to England, Houdini would start saying, they're all frauds, it doesn't work, it's not real. And I've never seen any proof of it. And Arthur Conan Doyle was writing letters back to him saying, how can you honestly say that when you were as elated and your mind was blown like I was? And Houdini wouldn't, they were very close friends, and he wouldn't write back to him, and it caused a fallout between the two of them. The two of them never spoke again after that. I often found that story. I thought that'd make a great movie one day. If someone out there writing movies, that make a great movie script. But Houdini also left instructions that when he would die, he would come back publicly if he could. And a good long time after his death, his wife hosted a radio show in New York, I think it was, where they were going to try and bring him forward. And it's actually quite touching. The last thing, he doesn't come forward during the show. And the last thing she says is like, Harry, wherever you are, good night, my love. It was really sweet, actually, and sad. But it really brought home to you why people want mediums, and also why the predators, both earthly and interdimensional, prey upon it. And you're right, Timothy, it does tie in very much into the same kind of phobias that are among society right now that existed after World War One and the American Civil War, and they're ripe for harvesting.
Yeah, and what Timothy was saying about like a revival of this kind of culture would be really great, but again, that with that will come all the fakes and the people wanting to just make money off of it and be using all kinds of tricks and stuff. But with that, you've got to go through, weed through all that stuff to get the real thing. And there probably are real people out there who are working, like Thomas, you've talked about working with Oberon, or, I'm sure you could work with some of the goetic entities to kind of do this thing where I still kind of hold the idea that, after somebody dies, they stick around in this realm for a little bit as they are, and then they go through whatever metempsychosis and then reincarnate typically. And I think after that's gone, there might still be a way to connect to the memory of that person that exists, that's held together by all the people that know them and the impressions that they left, kind of their karmic imprint, if you will.
Psychic footprint.
Yeah, psychic footprint. Yeah, the psychic footprint is still wet in the sand, so to speak. And there are entities probably, whether it's Oberon or whatever in the Goetia, that can communicate with that and bring information out of that, kind of the way that... I think there have been people that have psychics that have worked in law enforcement before that have helped find, there's TV shows enough about it where they use psychics to find out, how someone died, for instance. And there might be a way to do that. There might be a way to tap into the memory of someone to find that, but you have to you as the, or whoever it is as the medium, as a conduit between an entity and it. It's almost like there's two layers of conduits going there. There's the medium, and then there's whatever they're communicating with, which communicates with the psychic footprint of the person that died. And yeah, that takes some talent and skill, and it'd be great, like she was saying, that to bring that kind of thing back to where, maybe, when I was living over on the west side of the state, for instance, there was a girl who had died in the park across the street from the house. And I'm pretty sure I saw some sort of like psychic person show up who did some kind of like hand gesture meditation and stuff. And then he had a jacket on that said like tracker, I want to say, on the back of it or something. And he and a bunch of other like detective types went into the park over there. And I'm like, I kind of think that guy might be like a remote viewer. He kind of looked a little Native American looking and stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me if law enforcement might hire out psychics and stuff like that, or contract people like that who help, find, why did this girl die? Was it a suicide or something? But, there's enough information out there with like the military having used remote viewers and stuff, and all this stuff is incredibly top secret. So I doubt that, we'd even be able to find any information on it. But I would imagine that there are people out there working in the private sector that get contracted to do work like this. And then with that being said, like what Timothy was talking about, bringing back that revival again, where there are, people getting together like the folks did in upstate New York, working with something like this. It's kind of a modern, or whatever, our current era version of spiritualism, where they're not necessarily trying to communicate with the dead through like tapping on the walls, but maybe some people will figure out like some like analog circuitry that they can print out on like a 3D printer that, they can use to communicate with entities or something, like some of the kind of ghost hunter types that, or something that came out of that tradition. Cause the ghost hunter stuff is still kind of end of the late 90s, early 2000s thing. So like the next generation of this kind of stuff, maybe a little more occult and a little less, a little less bullshit, right? Yeah. Perfect. But real occultists getting out there, real magicians getting out there and communicating with entities and stuff. I think it'd be really cool to have like a revival of that kind of era.
Goetia Detective Group.
The Goetia Detective Group. We'll start that on Facebook. Yeah. But stuff like that, I think it'd be really cool. And, it's like, I've said this before, that like the chaos magic movement needs to evolve a little bit. Like when did Pete Carroll write Liber Null? Was that in 70s?
76.
76.
Yeah, right in the middle of the punk rock thing. Yeah. When it kicked off.
Yeah. It's almost, it's coming up on what, 50 years, almost 60 years, and it's like there needs to be something more. There needs to be a continuum, not like, it's not like chaos magic was defeating Thelema or defeating the Golden Dawn or defeating Eliphas Levi or anything like that, but it's just a continuum. And it's like, okay, as we go forward past, we've been, in this Rona bullshit for going on our third year now. It's like, okay, we know life's going to suck out there. We know we're building this parallel reality up. So it's like, let's, all of us here and everybody listening, there's a new fucking magical tradition that we can start up. And, the kind of ideas that people might be inspired by are going to show up on shows like this. And where maybe somebody out there listening might, become inspired to, create some kind of spirit box or something, but that's not bullshit. But that's what I'm saying. Just a new tradition going forward. I think that's kind of what Timothy was talking about. Like a little bit of a new tradition going into, whether it's 2030 or, like you talk about, Thomas, the next Renaissance. I think that a magical practice is going to emerge and will be, in line, following up from chaos, following up from Thelema through Hermeticism and all that. And, like bringing back paganism again, like you talk about so much, Thomas, like there's a way that a new tradition is going to emerge. And I think it's starting to now. It's just kind of in its, it's barely formed yet. It's like a zygote. It's not even a fetus yet. It's barely a fertilized egg.
What you were saying about the spirit sticking around for a while. Years ago, I got talking to a Pavi. A Pavi are an ethnic group in Ireland. Most commonly known as travellers, but they're called Pavis. That's the ethnic name, and they have this. I asked one of the guys, I said, is that true that you have those wild rituals when a member of the community dies? And he goes, not anymore, because the last one was my uncle, but my grandparents would have done it. What they used to do was, if a member of the traveling community, the Pavi, died, they used to burn their covered wagon the little homes they live in, the horse-drawn carts, to the ground, and then they would go mad in the ashes, screaming the name of the person that was dead. And he said that his granddad did it when his grandmother died, and he was screaming her name, Josie, all night. And I said, why do you do that? And he goes, oh, it's to stop it's to stop them from going to heaven for a little bit longer, so we can talk to them before they go to heaven. So there you go. That's like, there you go. That's right up there with that, isn't it? Like keeping the bardo thing, keeping them around.
The Tibetans and the Nepalese have a very similar tradition. When someone dies, they burn them. And it's same reason. Yeah.
Interesting. They go mad into a frenzy. He said he saw his uncle going crazy into a frenzy. And there's a movie with Gabriel Byrne called Into the West, and his wife dies in it. It's about a guy dealing with his wife, traveler guy dealing with his wife dying. And there's one point he says, "Oh, do you want me to put on a big show, have a typical traveler, a funeral where I cover myself in the ashes of the caravan and scream and shout all night?" And that was like, I never knew that. And then I asked a real traveler guy, "Is that true?" And he says, "Yeah, they used to do that in the old days. We don't do it now, but they used to do it."
Yeah. I'm really fascinated by that culture that's over there in Ireland, the travelers. I've been fascinated by them for a long time. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Golden-tongued mummies might have talked with ancient gods. If ancient Egyptian mummies weren't already mysterious and intriguing enough, the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced this week that 2 golden-tongued mummies, one male and one female, had been unearthed at a site in Mima, Egypt. This dehydrated couple joins another golden-tongued mummy from the Toposris Magna Temple.
Dehydrated couple. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
I was trying not to laugh too. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Sorry. Continue.
No, I was really trying to not break character there. Whew. All right. Okay.
It's like an extreme form of having a headache. Go ahead. Sorry. Sorry, dear. We're a dehydrated couple.
God, it's so fucking hot.
Sorry, I will shut up now. I will shut up.
This dehydrated couple joins another golden tongue mummy from the Toposris. I can't fucking get. Okay. From the Toposris Magna Temple in Alexandria, whose existence was revealed back in February. As strange as they may seem, the discovery of the God damn it. All right.
Control yourself, woman. Professional. Be a professional.
I know. All right. As strange as they may seem, the discovery of these valuable bodily modifications may help answer the question, how did ancient people talk to the gods? The 2,500-year-old mummies were found as part of the excavation led by the University of Barcelona. Their tombs were found in El Banasa, or as it was known in antiquity, the city of Oxyrhynchus. The tomb of the male is particularly important because it was still sealed. Esther Pons Malato, one of the co-directors of the archaeological mission from the University of Barcelona, told the National that it is extremely rare to find undisturbed tombs. The limestone tomb included a scarab amulet, canopic jars used as part of the mummification process, 400 small earthenware figurines, and the golden tongue, which was still in the mummified man's mouth. The identity of the male has not yet been determined, but archaeologists are hopeful that when the accompanying inscriptions are deciphered, they will have a better sense of who he once was. The quartz tomb of the woman has been disturbed, and as a result, the items inside were in poor condition. Her golden tongue, however, was still lodged in her mouth. A third smaller golden tongue amulet was once the property of a 3-year-old child. While the Egyptian ministry's statement did not specify the purpose of these golden tongues, the ministry had previously stated with respect to the temple tomb that golden tongues were meant to enable the deceased to speak to the god Osiris in the afterlife. They were, in our modern parlance, a kind of prosthetic or technological device that could enable the wearer to be understood by the gods. In ancient Egyptian theories of the afterlife, in which the righteousness of the deceased was assessed by the gods after death, the ability to converse with one's judges would have been especially important. Though the newly discovered prosthetic tongues are garnering a lot of attention, their existence in Greek and Roman era, in the Roman era is well known. An excavation report published by the Egypt Exploration Fund in 1891 notes that some mummies fell to powder on being touched, and nothing of interest was ever found in them except another golden plate. It would be a mistake to say that gold tongue leaves were common. These are costly items, but they weren't unheard of. Tongues aren't the only body parts that receive some technological enhancement in the mummification process. Artificial eyes made of calcite or linen often replaced the soft tissue in the first millennium BCE. Though these additions are often assumed to be cosmetic, they may have been a kind of replacement for organic eyes in the afterlife. Eye loss was relatively common in antiquity, and a variety of diseases and conditions could cause blindness. In some burials, golden eyelid covers were found. Perhaps these inorganic items were supposed to serve as functional substitutes in the afterlife. In his book on ancient Egypt, Scott Steeman writes that pieces of gold leaf were placed over tongues, eyes, and other body parts, in the belief that these would restore various functions in the afterlife. Interestingly, prosthetic tongues do not need to be magically transformed to become functional. The 16th century barber surgeon Ambrose Paré, the first doctor to identify phantom limb phenomenon, describes an artificial tongue that could supply the defect of speech when the tongue was cut off. The technology was accidentally discovered, he tells us, by a peasant man who had lost a great deal of his tongue and was drinking from a wooden bowl when he realized that he could make sounds. Beginning with individual letters, he relearned how to speak. As Kate Chenoweth writes in her extraordinary book, The Prosthetic Tongue, for Paré, the artificial tongue was thought to restore the entire faculty of speech and his language. In the case of the golden tongue leaves, the tongues might be more about bodily enhancement than about repairing a broken faculty. Communication between deities and human beings is difficult. For starters, if deities speak in a language, which language is it? For those who made the golden tongues in Egypt, the Egyptian language had gone through multiple periods of transition that were accompanied by two different scripts, hieroglyphs and hieratic, a kind of cursive shorthand. Demotic, a cursive form of Egyptian, had been flourishing in the region for 200 years, which was around the time that Greek arrived in the Nile Delta. On a purely local level, which of these languages would the gods speak, and how do the gods communicate? Moreover, given that language is inherently limiting, many people hypothesize that God spoke using signs or symbols. That might mean using written symbols, but it also might mean any aspect of human experience. Nature, weather patterns, the constellations, the human body, and even coincidences were all ripe for interpretation. And because these symbols or signs weren't governed by syntax or a narrow range of meaning, they had a kind of richness and flexibility appropriate for a powerful deity. Speculation about the ways the gods communicated had consequences. If a deity can speak to us using weather patterns, how do we understand them and how do we speak back? Viewed in this context, perhaps human beings just need a little help communicating with the gods. The golden tongues are technological enhancements that allowed deceased people to speak the divine language. Not only would this modification assist them when they came to judgment before Osiris, the god of the dead, it would allow them to participate in post-mortem society more broadly.
I like this. It's like we really do have a thread kind of being drawn between these stories here with talking about communication through the brain, talking about communication through spirits, and then talking about communications to God or to gods or entities or something like that. So we always kind of find this synchronistic thing that we don't intentionally try to put these stories together this way. But yeah, that's real interesting there about the golden tongue being used to communicate with it. Was it with Osiris when someone dies, and like the way that corresponds to like certain initiatory rituals within the Western magical tradition, you know, that idea of kind of weighing the worth of the person against, you know, on the scales and all of that. So it's like, oh, they just these synchronicities keep going everywhere. But yeah, I think that's interesting that it's like, it's a symbolic thing probably done in a ritual where, you know, this person who is obviously of some status, like a king or some royalty or a high, yeah, pharaoh, thank you, and his wife, the dehydrated couple, like their bodies, you know, they left their body, and then part of the ritual would be to prepare that body in a way, and putting in something symbolic, like the way that with the Osiris legend, what his willy gets cut off, right? Is that what happens? And they, you know, they throw it and they have to replace it with a golden one, I think. Is that the way that it works? And so, yeah. But it's kind of a similar type of thing with that. It's just with this, they're using the tongue. So some sort of, you know, again, like linguistic, this thing that's tying together the very first story we had about communication. They still don't understand. And, you know, we still don't, they in today's society don't understand what it means to be human, what consciousness is, what we really are, what thoughts are, what communication actually is. So they're still mucking around with that. And then it's like the spiritualists had a little bit better idea of things, you know, in the mid-late 19th century, early 20th century. And it's like going back, you know, back to ancient Egypt here. Like we're kind of overlaying our current understanding of things on it. But it's like, I would imagine that was some sort of ritual to put this, as they were mummifying the body, you know, removing the muscle of the tongue and putting this in. I imagine that was a, you know, deeply sacred ceremony that was done, you know, by I don't know who did the mummification, what doctors or what priest class did mummification back in that time frame. But I would imagine that was a very special and sacred thing as part of the, you know, the metempsychosis there. These people were probably freshly dead. I don't know. I don't know too much about Egyptian mummification, but I would imagine the body wasn't dead for very long before they started removing the organs and preparing them for, you know, they always talk about the afterlife in these stories, but I think it has more to do with reincarnation again. And it's just, we're putting, you know, the overlay of the Abrahamic thing of an afterlife onto something that's not monotheistic or not Abrahamic in nature.
Yeah, that news story is a bit all over the place, but I do like the idea of putting a tongue in there so they have the gift of speech of the gods, so they could communicate with the gods. I quite like that idea. I think that's kind of interesting, but I'd just like to throw one more into the mix. What if it's purely symbolic, and during their life they were actors or great orators, there's poets, and the golden tongue was a symbol of their skills on this earth as great actors or poets or orators or singers. Just, that's another thing. These guys are very Osiris this, the afterworld this, that, and the other, but there could be other aspects to it too. That, you know, we often say that a person's a golden touch. You know, someone who's really good at football has a golden foot. You know, this kind of thing. It's the same thing. Could they have been could have been actors? Now, it's interesting. I wonder that they murdered her when he died, because that was quite common in ancient Egypt, that the concubines and slaves and stuff went with them, as well as, you know, so that's another thing that could have been another thing. But this was also a story on The Simpsons. You remember that Jebediah Springfield, the founder of Springfield? Yep. They found his body with a golden tongue in his skull. That was the legend. I think it wasn't the legend. I think it was a spoof. But Donald Sutherland, as the professor, it was when The Simpsons was amazing. Put the golden tongue in the grave, and he goes, well, sometimes the myth has more value than the reality, so it's best that people continue to believe he had a golden tongue. But I think maybe I just think that story's a bit mad. It's a bit all over the place. But, you know, I think they're narrowing it down. The golden tongue thing could be just they were phenomenal speakers in this life.
I think during the reading that with our outbursts, I think that was a good example of the language of the gods. Yeah. You know, they speak in signs and symbols, but emotions and feelings. And I mean, that I could not stop laughing, but it was like an infectious feeling. Yeah. You know, I don't know. So I think that that's another way that the gods communicate. So I think we just communicated with the gods.
Have you ever read the Book of the Dead? It's unbelievably complex.
I have. You know, I can't say that I understood it, but I have read it. The
Egyptian rites of death were you couldn't make them up. They were like you'd need to have a PhD by the time you got to meet any of the gods. It was so complex. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know about that one. It's an interesting story, but it sounds to me too opposite. You know, I always thought like even the megaliths and everything goes the land of the dead, and communicating with the ancestors, the land of the dead, the gods are dead, the other side. But those things also had an earthly meaning as well. They wouldn't have just simply been for that purpose. But it's an interesting story. I'd love to see a photograph of what the tongues look like. It's really cool.
Is there a photograph?
No, it's got that skull.
No, there is one.
Oh.
Here, hold on.
If it's no hassle, I just to see what it looks like.
Yeah, they're right here. You want me to send it to? Yeah, hang on. We're gonna get this up because they look really cool. Yeah, I think the land of the dead thing. I'm sure they understood it with a lot more meaning than just the two sides, the living and the dead.
Yeah.
So when we hear their mythologies and things like that, we see it in that way. But I'm sure they had so much more behind it that hopefully one day we get to.
And also the thing is, like, an Osiris, or was it Horus or Osiris, would measure their soul, and if it weighed less
Osiris.
If it weighed less than a feather.
Yep.
They're actually quite impressive, aren't they?
Yeah.
They look like they had been cast like in allergen or something like that, or it's latex rubber. They're actually really well made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that little one belonged to a 3-year-old kid.
Yeah, yeah. Then it could be other things too. Maybe they were, I don't know. There's so many possibilities. The kids one looks like it's a different kind of metal too.
What's that that skill that some people have? Is it psychometry, where you can look at something for long enough, stare at something for long enough, and start to get impressions of what it was used for? Even if
it's stone, you have to hold it. And and it's interesting. And you can put go to megaliths or castles or ancient buildings, and the stones, the whole thing of the stone tape theory, the actual stones hold in the quartz crystal like a tape recording of the events that happened in the past.
Right.
And some
so
people
it's just kind of attuning to that, and then you can see it.
Yeah, but I don't know about the gold because that wouldn't have quartz in it. Interesting though.
Yeah, I wonder if there's got to be some resonance with it, though. I wonder if there's somebody who would be able to do that and see it.
But didn't the Egyptians eat gold and everything? Like it was part of their diet. The monatomic gold, and they used to actually eat.
Monoatomic. I was going to say colloidal gold, but yeah, I think it's the monoatomic. Interesting stuff, anyway. All right, Thomas, the moment we've all been waiting for.
Okay.
You ready?
Oh, this came up early. Okay.
Here we go.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
Good evening and welcome to the first psychic weather report of 2022, and also a big one. It's an important one. I'll try to phrase my words so we avoid the censors or whatever. Anyway, it's one of these classic hermetic maxims, as above, so below, and it's something we need to pay attention in the zeitgeist and in the self and in the local environment. We've reached a Stalingrad type point. If you think in terms of 23 months ago, that was at the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, the Third Reich invasion of Soviet Union, and that continued on. Its objective was to get to Moscow. It failed in its objective, and instead it went down to the Caucasus to try and take the oil fields, and it got bogged down in Stalingrad, and it stayed there until the army group south of the Wehrmacht was wiped out, and that began the retreat towards Berlin, and the end of it, which culminated in Walpurgis Night, 1945, when Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. Apparently, it was the end of the Third Reich. In terms of the world situation right now, think in terms of the lockdown that happened back in early 2020 was Operation Barbarossa. That was them invading us. That was them moving and mobilizing, and we were taken by surprise. We were bewildered. We were shocked. They used a blitzkrieg of the needlecraft, of the terrors, of the programming, of the mind control, of the propaganda, and we weren't ready for that kind of warfare. And like what happened in 1941, the Red Army were overrun because they were facing something that they had no concept of how to deal with it. Well, that's been us. We had no concept of how to deal with what has happened between then and just before Christmas, when a change happened. they a lot of their targets have now stopped, and they got bogged down in their own Stalingrad. Now, that doesn't mean we've beaten them. That means we've held them. We're holding them, and we've held them at this point. There's been very significant things have happened recently, and governments all around the world, but especially there was on the Joe Rogan show recently, a historical monumental interview happened, and that really was very similar to our Stalingrad, that finally we have a bit of a buffer, a wall has been put up, and it stops against this international crime syndicate that has been at us for the last 23 months. So they've hit Stalingrad. We now have to hit them back hard in the ways we know how, knowledge and things like memes, and not until we win the middle ground and get the people who are in the middle to actually join us, because I now believe they've actually collapsed. They won't get any further than they've got now. And the only way they could get further than they've got now is absolute viciousness. And it won't happen. And the fact that we have a deep state individual such as Dr. Malone coming on our side now and basically validating all our conspiracies about the last 23 months means that we've now dug them in, and they're dug in, and their winter is now coming. And it's what happened at Stalingrad was basically they surrendered eventually. They were cut off. They were surrounded in the pincer movement by the Red Army around the back of them. And a field marshal actually surrendered, and the Russians did not believe it was a field marshal. They have to get constant confirmation, because it was a tradition because of the Prussian tradition in the Wehrmacht, is that a field marshal captured takes his life. He doesn't surrender. Now, this Malone guy is the equivalent of capturing a field marshal. We now have one of their big boys on our side. We can now start beginning planning the counteroffensive and then move back to their Berlin bunker. Now, that's where we are now. Now, you will, because of the Hermetic maxim of as above, so below, this will be echoed in your own life. You'll suddenly find that people who are involved in maybe a legal dispute, a bullying situation at work, things like this, you will find that it suddenly has come to a stop. And you're suddenly able to find the ability to catch a breath and move back, because this is what's happened. It started just before Christmas, and it's now, if there's this genuine sense that the worst is over, but that doesn't mean the whole thing is over. It means we have to start a counterattack, an offensive, and this will be in your own life too. And this is where we are now with the psychic weather. It's actually a very important thing that's happening at the moment in our personal lives, in the macrosphere, in the microsphere. We have dug in. We're now fighting a vicious hand-to-hand war up front, but we're now able to finally to fight. We weren't able to fight before. We were pushed back. And just like with Hitler at Stalingrad, they rolled the dice one too many, and they allowed their own egos to take over, thinking they were infallible. And they've slipped up now. And they're now actually doing some of the most appalling things, like doctors all over I don't want to say too much because of the censorship. Doctors all over the place are now being struck off lists for merely making suggestions that are common sense and standard medical practice. They're becoming extremely vicious because we now have a rat backed into a corner, a demonic rat, the crime syndicate, the global crime syndicate backed into the corner. And remember, the jinn in government buildings, the jinn encapsulated skin job in your government is also reflected by the jinn encapsulated skin job in your daily life. So always remember that. You should always look at what's at the top in the zeitgeist, and then always see that it's reflected in your own life, in personality things, and so on. And we're at that point now. We haven't won. We've turned the corner. And if you suddenly are wondering, why is that asshole at work stopped bugging me right now? Why has my family members who've been bugging me to get needlecraft stopped? What's this all about? That's what's happened. We've dug a trench and bogged them down. Now we can push them back. Now there'll be fanatics who will fight to the very end, just like what happened in Berlin. But that doesn't matter. It's the war can slowly move back now. What this does is to give us the same thing I gave the Red Army: confidence. It gave them confidence that the indestructible army could be defeated. And that's what we have now. The indestructible globalist crime syndicate can be defeated. And we now have finally a respite. So that's the weakening psychic weather, the Stalingrad of the psyche. Dig in and get ready to get out and start mobilizing and moving forward to take both our society back and your life back. Thank you.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
Great one, Thomas. I really, really enjoyed your military history there. That's something that's just so cool, the way that you draw those analogies there like that. And I just kind of wanted to ask, as someone like I said, my education kind of sucked growing up through, going through middle school and high school and stuff. But just elaborating a little bit about Stalingrad and all of that. Like, could you tell a little story there about what you mean specifically with that?
What Stalingrad was?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Stalingrad was a city in Russia named after Stalin, and it was on the Volga River leading down to the Black Sea, and it was a very unpopular, very successful industrial base. After this Third Reich failed to capture Moscow, they were literally driven down on the gates of Moscow. They decided to concentrate on taking down the oil fields in the Caucasus, places like Georgia and Armenia, which was down south, Black Sea, Caspian Sea area. And they moved their army group south, which was the biggest army group of the Wehrmacht and the Third Reich, and all their main SS and Panzer units down there. And all they had to do was go down and capture the oil fields. That was always their main objective all along, to be no longer oil dependent on other countries. Instead, just because it was called Stalingrad, Hitler had an ego thing. Let's capture the city named after him. Now, Stalin was not going to allow the city named after him to be taken. So, people say things like, the Red Army was brutal, and it was in certain ways, but also there was a genuinely rallying around that we can now stop them. It was almost like a magical symbol. It was named after their leader. And you will think, the latest variant is Stalingrad. I'm not going to say it. The David Bowie variant, right, that we currently have. It flopped. It didn't work. They got into Stalingrad, but they didn't capture it. The Russians and the Red Army were on the other side of the river. And just by moving people over at night on small boats, they were able to slowly fill the side of the city that then Wehrmacht had taken over. And they forced the Germans into a brutal winter where they had to basically live in the sewers. And it's like rats, they had to live in the sewers. And eventually, they fought bravely and amazingly. And there is tremendous bravery with the German army. But what happened was their field marshal surrendered, and that broke down morale. And basically, like what's happened now with this Malone guy, has come to our side. Okay, and it's hard to believe. I'm looking at this guy, thinking this guy's about as insider as you can get, a deep stater, and here he is validating and saying everything we're saying is true. And he's willing to die for it. And so we have the field marshal. We've captured him. And we have a trophy. And that trophy is enough to push them out. And eventually the Red Army encirculated the city of Stalingrad behind it. They went behind it. And they trapped the army group inside. And they annihilated an Italians and a Hungarian and a Romanian division that was also in the area on the German side. And it's just a matter then of waiting for them to surrender and starve them out. But that was when they went from years and years of being absolutely having the shit beaten out of them by the Germans. The Germans, through their own stupidity, rolling the dice one too many, were being told that this latest variant is deadly, and apparently it's nothing. It's like a sore throat, and it's good news. It's actually the end of the whole pandemic. But what they did was they played the card one too much, and they sexed this thing up really more in order to keep their power and their ego going, just like what way Hitler attacked Stalin. Now, that's where we are. And I'm seeing that already in my own daily life. And I'm sure you are seeing similar things too. People you were having altercations with might suddenly stop. It maybe seem a little easier. They've run out of steam. They've run out of supplies. They've run out of energy. This is what brings an army down when the supply columns are knocked out. And that's what happened. Their supply column is the mass media. The mass media is there to feed that fear porn propaganda about the needlecraft, Rona, scamdemic, whatever. That has now changed. I've read many articles this week, which I was quite surprised, even in things like The Guardian, reviewing books entitled by virologists saying the year the world went insane, questioning the madness of how it was run from the beginning of the lockdowns, the mandatory thing, trying to get children, etc., the whole thing of coupling it. And now I implore people to go to BitChute and listen to this 3-hour interview, because I literally had my jaw hanging off the ground. He confirmed everything, that the manufacturers are involved with the big tech companies and the mainstream media. The BBC is a particularly vicious, sinister player in all this. Now, something else happened this week. Tony Blair, an absolute vicious war criminal, was given the knighthood by the Queen. Now, this is like the flailing demon. It's desperately trying to keep its world alive. And that's what that is. It's like giving their biggest monsters knighthoods. It keeps them alive, it keeps their energy, their demonic energy going. But it's also a symbol of fear. A fear. There's fear of what's the fallout for the royals with Prince Andrew over Epstein's Island and things like this. There's fear everywhere. Remember, these are psychopaths, and they have an element of primal fear that's not like the worry and anxiety we have. It's literally an existential drive to kill or be killed. But they can't do it now. They're bogged down. We have too big a name on our side. And it's just like the way the Soviet Union fell in a matter of 18 months, and just like the Tsarist royal family after 700 years went in 72 hours, this is happening to them now. And and even the time frame is spooky. I was looking at the time frame between how Operation Barbarossa started to Stalingrad, and it's more or less the same time we've got between the lockdown when it first started in 2020 and now. So even the timing is the same. So it just gives me a lot of hope that within 2 years' time, we could have, when people say we need a Nuremberg 2, we may bloody well get it. We may bloody well get it. And we may have, sizable proportions of the current crime syndicate either in prison or hanging from ropes. I'm really starting to see that now. That's a possibility. Because all we have to do, people think, okay, the normies will never wake up. But there's a middle ground that will. And all you need to do is twist them a little bit. And they can't hide the injuries caused by the needlecraft forever. They can't hide that forever. Just like one interesting parallel is when the Germans started retreating towards Berlin, they had entire groups in their sappers, which are like engineers, right, digging up mass graves of Polish army officers they'd murdered, civilians they'd murdered, and carrying the dead bodies back to Germany so no one would find the mass graves. They never thought, and we're seeing that now. They're all, they're hiding, all these sports stars collapsing. It doesn't exist. Hide it. All these kids that some of the, and now I don't want to say too many words, but I just watched that interview to expand what I'm saying here. And that's, I'm seeing it now, a parallel between
what's that interview, Thomas?
His name is Dr. Malone. I can't remember his first name, and he's on Joe. Someone will fill the comments, but it's very
Yeah.
it's huge.
Thank you.
But it was banned. It was banned, and he lost his Twitter account over. They are rats backed into a corner, frailing, and they can't think of anything new to do. So they give knighthoods to the likes of animals like Tony Blair. So this is a time of hope, but it's also a time to be vigilant. And that includes your personal life too. As above, so below.
Wow. So thank you, Thomas. That's like a little miniature velocity of now that we all got, tagged onto the psychic weather report. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it, because I don't know. I wish I was more well versed in military history, even though, being a former military guy, I understand a lot of the lower level stuff, but being able to see it from that kind of macrocosmic level, I wasn't an officer, I was an enlisted guy. So it's like, I would really like to, I could probably talk to you for hours about this stuff. And thank you to Saints/Page who posted the article or the BitChute video down in, yep, we'll pin that. But yeah, Thomas, I could talk to you for hours about this and listen to you talk about it, because I know you'd sent over some stuff to us in the Facebook group message, and it was a little over our heads, but that was really helpful. I think it clarified things for us a little bit.
What stuff was that?
You sent the thing over about the knighting of what's his Tony Blair.
Yeah. I mean, Americans aren't aware that he's absolutely despised in England. He's considered. He's seen literally as a Hitler type figure.
Okay.
Because he led. There was before Gulf War one happened. Was it one or two? Two. Something like 7 million people marched in the centre of London, said no war, and he laughed it off and sent. And he created a phony lie. People like a guy called Dr. Kelly, very similar to Hillary Clinton, but the body count started piling up all around him. It seems that any time there was a problem to him, these people mysteriously died. And we went to war anyway, and he's responsible for at least 1.5 million deaths in the Middle East. But on top of that, the United States wouldn't have been able to go to war against Saddam without his blessing. They really needed a major big ally to say, come with us. Remember, the French wouldn't do it. They said that the French were saying, and they were calling them cheese-eating suspender monkeys, because the French were saying things like, quite correctly, that Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11, nothing at all. Why are you attacking Iraq? You're just going for the oil at the end of the day. That's all you're doing. And that's what's shown to be true now. And there are no weapons of mass destruction, but they needed a world leader to validate the neocons, the Bush neocons, and the Cheneys and all those creatures. And he was seen as an absolute snake who did that for his own political gain. And when it was over, it got even better. This is the kind of psychopath he is. The European Union mulled over the idea of having a president, right? Now, because the majority religion of the European Union is Catholic, overnight, while he's trying to promote himself, I'm the ideal Catholic, I'm the ideal candidate for the European Union president, first one, he converted to Catholicism just so he could beef up his chance to get the job. And that's the kind of snake he is. And then he formed the World Council of Churches. And now he's back to tell us all to take the needlecraft and this kind of thing. He's an absolute creature. And Americans are unaware of how absolutely hated he is in the UK. Absolutely hated. And they're nearly having a civil war over there at the moment over the fact he's been knighted. So that's the Jindicate flailing its arms around like an animal trapped in the corner. It can't think of anything new to do. So it reverts back to its own monstrosities with its own monsters.
This is awesome, Thomas. I think I almost feel like we should do a symposium, or I know Christian and I were just talking about a military show on his channel. I think maybe this might be a good three-way thing for you, me, and him to talk about.
I think Christian just wants to see pictures of hot guys in uniforms. That's what I think.
We love you, Christian. I'm looking forward to you this one.
Any excuse will do. Come on.
No, I think it'd be awesome if we did this. We were talking about maybe early February. Fuck. All right. We'll make
but anyway, he has a point because the girls would probably like that too. So
yeah. But no, let's do this. We were talking about maybe in early February doing a military show on his channel. And I think, Thomas, it'd be great to get you on there because you are far more knowledgeable about the history side of things. I have my experience from being in two branches of the U.S. military, not combat arms MOS. I was in the fucking band. But I did my 4 years in the Marine Corps and 3 years in the Army, so I have a little bit of that experience. But it'd be great to get your military history, and we could have a few talks between now and then. So let's talk to him about that. And I'm sure, Christian, you're watching this on the replay, and we'll get a DM thing going, a three-way going. So
on one of my either Thomas Sheridan or Thomas Sheridan 2, I did a talk called War Magic years ago. If someone wants to go into those, one of those channels and dig it out, pop it in the links. War Magic.
Yes. When you guys listening along at home, please find that for us and drop it here so we can copy the links over and put this all in the YouTube version of this once this goes up this evening. So, wow, we got a little mini Velocity of Now here in the Week in Strange. So this is good. We use the communication, the golden tongue to talk to the gods.
Yeah, I told you guys.
Yeah. This is beautiful. So.
I still get people sending me emails like saying I listened to the shows all the way back to 2013 and they're like the greatest radio show ever. To this day, I'm still getting loads of people sending me emails about them.
Yeah, I love your older work, Thomas. It's great. Like we were just talking about this last night. It's like it's just there's some real gold in there. Timeless stuff. Not like your stuff isn't timeless now, but it's like that stuff that needs to be archived. So like if
some of the comedy stuff too. One of them that came up on my feed today was me calling up RTE trying to sell them cocaine because they had been, but I put on the voice of Tony Montana from and I really did call them up from Scarface, and I was like, hey baby, he goes, my name is Tony, I'm from Cuba. I want to do a deal. You know what I'm saying, baby? Little deal. I did that live on the air. And another time I was like, I called up the climate change group office in Dublin in the government. And this was done live on the air. And it was brilliant. And I said, I have a friend who has asthma and he's using up the atmosphere. Should I kill him? And she goes, or something like that. And then it was a racial equality group. And I said, well, I'm sharing a flat with a Muslim. Yeah, what's the problem? I have an orange and the mantelpiece, and an orange on the kitchen counter, and it's Israeli. Do I protect him from the orange or the orange from him? And I can't believe I used to do this. I used to call up prank calls live on the air. It was a different vibe back then. It was brilliant,
That was great. So I hope
and you see these bureaucrats had no sense of humor. They couldn't even figure out I was joking,
Yeah, it's like that. But yeah, I really hope people archive this. Like, I know what is it over on Odyssey that some of this stuff is backed up on? Is that what the channel is?
Yeah. If everyone's free to back up any of my stuff or make compilations or anything like that they want.
Yeah.
Once they're tributes.
Right.
I'm not using that as evidence,
Right. Yeah, but it's just it's like we were talking about the early albums of people, just like where the real magic is in their art. And yeah, I think all that stuff needs to be archived and put on DVDs or whatever.
You know what it was that I didn't have a big audience back then, so I didn't think no one would ever hear. So I was much more daring than I am now. And plus, it was long before the cancel culture and all that stuff.
Let's bring back the daring. Let's bring that back. This has been a good one. Like I feel like we went through a lot of material today that brought us to this point. I mean, we're going on about an hour and a half now. So, do you want to leave it here for the day, T? Or
yeah.
Wow, that was a fast hour and a half.
Yeah, that was the psychic charge coming off this show today is monstrous. This is, I think, a really good place to leave things so that people can really sit and absorb that. And then, we'll have it back up later. Go back, watch it again, take notes. I know I'm going to. My knowledge of history sucks. We just got shit education over here. But, I learned more out of these hour and a half, talks and rants and, the banter. And in the talking in tongues, whatever we're doing, laughing our asses off than I did in all my years of school. So yeah, go back, archive this when it's up, take notes. Yeah. Wow.
We've got the two videos, Thomas's video and the Joe Rogan on BitChute are both pinned in the comments of this. And I'll make sure to drop those in the Beyond Room 313 group, our parallel reality and all that stuff, so we can all go and study up on this stuff. Because it's like, like Thomas said in the psychic weather, we're going forward, and there's a new chapter in this, and it's time for us to be all spun up. Because I know as an American, I didn't know shit about this, and I know you sent a few of this to us, Thomas, and it went over our head, and now I'm like, okay, that's why.
Buy my book, Valpurgis Night. You get a lot from that.
All right, so we'll
shameless plug.
Somebody put that down in here so I can pin it too. Thank you, my lazy ass. I can fucking pin that in.
And don't buy it from Amazon. Buy it from Book Depository.
Right.
Or your local. It's available everywhere. Your local book distributor.
Sweet. All right. Well, this has been a great one, and
thank you to all of our new Patreon people. We appreciate you guys. Love you so much. And to anybody that can't do Patreon, no worries. Just like and share, and that helps so much. But yeah, I did want to give a special shout out because we've got 3 or 4 new Patreon people this week, I think. Yeah, really, really appreciate the shit out of you guys. All the love.
Yeah, and that's helping fund the American side of Beyond Room 313 here. So, I mean, we're using my iPhone is up there as a camera for this, and we just got this one microphone here. We're putting together more gear, and we've got some films in the works for you guys. One that she and I are working on, and then one that we're collaborating with on Thomas right now. And there's some more stuff in the works. So that's going to help fund the travel for one of these big projects that we'll be dropping this year, kind of on the scale of Liber Velocity, and that level of production. So it helps with the software and everything that we use for this. I'm paying for a couple licenses. Thomas is paying for a couple licenses for software, and just every little bit helps.
I spent €500 for a film stock footage license the other day for a year, but it's worth every penny. It seems like a lot of money, but stock footage is incredibly expensive, but I found an amazing deal. So that was like the Patreon paid for that. So thank you, everybody. And, there's lots of things like it paid for the new sound recorder and, lots of things. It goes into the gear. It doesn't go into, it doesn't go into that gear.
Yeah, so it's all really helpful, and like I'm paying for we use frame.io for sharing. It's a file sharing service that we pay a subscription for. I'm paying about $60 a month for that, so me and Thomas and Timothy can share video files back and forth. And I'm paying for an Adobe Creative Cloud thing, so I can use Premiere and stuff over here to edit these videos together. So it's not just going up our noses. We're not drinking it away. We're making this channel possible for everyone, and we love you all for helping out and making this possible. And then traveling, like I said, we're going to interview somebody this year for one of the films we're working on, and that Patreon money is going to help pay for airfare and everything. So again, thank you to everybody who Patreons us and who shows up here for these live streams. It's really great, and everybody who showed up yesterday for the pub. So
yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah.
I'm waiting to hear the Velocity of Now theme. But anyway, good night, everybody. Good night, Tim, and you. Good night,
Good night. Good night, you guys.